today we'll discuss Srimad Bhagawatam, Canto 3, Chapter 9, Text 11. Oh, just a note. I've been leaving myself notes these last few verses about the meter. I don't know what kind of significance this has for anybody, but in case you're wondering, there is a name to this chanda or meter. It's called Vasanta Tilaka, springtime ornament. So it's just a really cool meter with 14 syllables to each pada, to each half a line. I like that kind of stuff. Old English makers.
Say it again.
Didn't hear you.
Tilaka.
Vasanta Tilaka.
Vasanta Tilaka.
Tvam Bhakti Yoga Paripavita Ritsaroja Tvam Bhakti Yoga Paripavita Ritsaroja Ase Shrute Kshitapato Nanu Nata Pumsam Ase Shrute Kshitapato Nanu Nata Pumsam Yad Yadhiya Ta Urugaya Vibhavayanti Yad Yadhiyata Urugaya Vibhavayanti. Did I mess that one up too?
No, we did.
Oh, okay. Sometimes we follow the leader into a ditch. Tad tad babu pranayase sad anugrahaya tad tad babu pranayase sad anugrahaya Tvam bhakti yoga paripavita ritsaroja Ase shrute kshitapato nanunata pumsam Yad yadhiyata urugaya vibhavayanti Tat tat vapu pranayase sadanugrahaya Tvam bhakti yoga paripavita ritsaroja Ase shrute kshitapato nanunata pumsam Yad yadhiyata urugaya vibhavayanti Tat tat vapu pranayase sadanugrahaya Others, please.
Tvam bhakti yoga paripavita hrit sarojam. Ase shrute kshitapato nanunata pumsam. Yad yadiyata uragaya
Tvam,
Tvam,
unto you,
unto you,
Bhakti Yoga,
Bhakti Yoga,
in devotional service,
in devotional service,
Paribhavita,
Paribhavita,
being 100% engaged,
being 100% engaged,
Rit
Rit
of the heart,
of heart,
Sorode,
Sorode,
on the lotus,
on the lotus,
Ase,
Ase,
you reside,
you reside,
Shrita Ikshita,
Sutta Ikshita,
seen through the ear.
seen through the ear.
Pata,
Pata,
the path.
the path,
Nunu,
Nanu,
now.
now,
Nata,
Nata,
oh my Lord.
O my Lord,
Hungsam,
Sam,
of the devotees.
of the devotees,
Yep, yep,
Yet,
whichever.
whichever,
Diya,
Diya,
by meditating.
by meditating,
Te,
Te,
your.
your,
Urugaya,
Urudaya,
O multi-glorious.
multi-glorious.
How often do you encounter a word like that? Not as often as we encounter the Supreme Personality of God. Vibhavayanti,
Vibhavayanti,
they specifically think of
they specifically think of
tat,
Tat,
the very same
the very same,
vapu,
Vapu,
transcendental form.
transcendental form,
Pranayase,
Pranayase,
do you manifest?
do you manifest,
Sat anugrahaya,
Satanuraya,
to show your causeless mercy.
to show your causeless mercy.
Buckle up. Translation. O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing. So what did we hear a few days back? There was another
It's through the nose.
smelling the Lord through the ears. So now we're seeing the Lord through the ears. So there's a big emphasis here on a couple of particular activities. Oh my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. And if you haven't fastened your seatbelts, now's a good time. I'm going to check the roads here. Okay. Oh, wait, there's people hiding. Seatbelt? Seatbelt, sir? Sir, your seatbelt, please? Okay. Purport, Srila Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purport. The statement here is that the Lord manifests himself before the devotee in the form in which the devotee likes to worship him, indicates that the Lord becomes subordinate to the desire of the devotee, so much so that he manifests his particular form as the devotee demands. The demand of the devotee is satisfied by the Lord because he is pliable to the in terms of the transcendental loving service of the Lord. A couple of ways to control people. I'm sorry, of the devotee, thank you. It indicates that the Lord becomes subordinate to the desire of the devotee, so much so that he manifests his particular form as the devotee demands. So there are a couple of ways to control people, right? We can do it in a very gross way by physical means, chastisement. Chastisement doesn't mean reading somebody out. Chastisement means whacking somebody with a stick, something like that. We use that a lot because Srila Prabhupada used the word, but chastisement is really more a physical thing. Castigation is what we more often indulge in, unfortunately. Unfortunately, too often indulge in. Another way is by like emotional manipulation, gaslighting, stuff like that. But the strongest way to control someone is by love, by affection. So that's what's being addressed here. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Ye yata mam prapadyante tans tataiva bhajamyaham. So here Krishna says, I respond to the devotee according to their surrender. So according to the degree of their surrender, but also according to the manner of their surrender. He responds accordingly. We should note, however, that the Lord is never the order supplier of the devotee. Here in this verse it is particularly mentioned, Tvam Bhakti Yoga Paribhavita. This indicates the efficiency achieved through the execution of matured devotional service or prema, love of Godhead. Okay, so maybe a couple of us here are a little, this is something to aspire for. On faith, one associates with bona fide devotees, and by such association, one can become engaged in bona fide devotional service, which includes proper initiation and the execution of the primary devotional duties prescribed in the revealed scriptures. This is clearly indicated herein by the word Shrutekshita. The Shrutekshita path is to hear from bona fide devotees who are conversant with Vedic wisdom, free from mundane sentiment. By this bona fide hearing process, the neophyte becomes cleansed of all material rubbish, and then he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord as described in the Vedas. So this last part of the paragraph is chalking out some of the stages, actually in a kind of condensed way, the stages of sadhana bhakti, as described by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The attachment of the devotee to a particular form of the Lord is due to natural inclination. Each and every living entity is originally attached to a particular type of transcendental service because he is eternally the servitor of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya says that the living entity is eternally a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, every living entity has a particular type of service relationship with the Lord eternally. This particular attachment is invoked by the practice of regulative devotional service to the Lord, and thus the devotee becomes attached to the eternal form of the Lord, exactly like one who is already eternally attached. Sometimes the question of whether Prabhupada or someone else might be a Nitya Siddha or a Sadhana Siddha would come up. And generally, Srila Prabhupada's response was, Siddha means Siddha. Sadhana Siddha, Nitya Siddha, what does that mean to you? Siddha means Siddha. Somebody who's perfected is perfected, whether it's by practice or because that's how they were originally created, has a connotations of time, and that's not part of the question. Originally, I guess, conceived of by the Lord. This attachment for a particular form of the Lord is called Svarupa Siddhi. The Lord sits on the lotus heart of the devotee in the eternal form the pure devotee desires, and thus the Lord does not part from the devotee as confirmed in the previous verse. The Lord, however, does not disclose himself to a casual or unauthentic worshiper to be exploited. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavritaha. But he says, I just don't reveal myself to any fool. My yogamaya, my mystic potency covers them, so they can't actually see me as I am. Rather, by yogamaya, the Lord remains concealed to the non-devotees or casual devotees who are serving their sense gratification. The Lord is never visible to the pseudo-devotees who worship the demigods in charge of universal affairs. The conclusion is that the Lord cannot become the order supplier of a pseudo-devotee, but he is always prepared to respond to the desires of a pure, unconditional devotee who is free from all tinges of material infection. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangrum Lankayate Didim Yakravatamam Vande Shri Gurun Dinataram Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamayam Dati Svapadantikam Pancha Kalpataru Nishtrakripa Sindho Yeva Chapatitanam Avanebhyo Vishnavebhyo Namo Tvam Bhakti Yoga Paripavita Saroja Ase Shrute Chitakato Nadunat Punsam Yad Yadhyata Urgaya Vibhava Yanatita Tadbahu Pranayase Sadanugrahaya. O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You were so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. So Srila Prabhupada points out in his purport, this applies most particularly to those whose practice has matured, those who are, especially to those who are sadhya bhaktas. Their bhakti is matured or perfected. So this means there are two possibilities here. Srila Prabhupada emphasizes one. One possibility is Pava or Rati, the stage of Pava or Rati, in which that's when the Lord actually begins to clearly manifest himself to the devotee. And that is a perfected stage. Bhava is the sadhya or goal of sadhana bhakti. But also prema is the goal of bhava bhakti. And bhava bhakti is not exactly a practice, like where you sit down and run your scales and do exercises and things. But it's really just kind of exercising what has manifest. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about a little bit about these stages of sadhana bhakti. But before I do that, I want to do something I don't usually do, because Srila Prabhupada quite often draws very heavily on Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's tika or commentary on many of these verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this purport is powerful and encouraging, I think, to all of us. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's is also quite powerful and encouraging. And may shed, because maybe there's a couple of degrees of angle difference in perspective or something. There's some things that may not come through to us in Srila Prabhupada's purport, but I think are interesting. So Vishwanath says, it's a medium paragraph. Bhakti, even without jnana, delivers one from material existence. So this is sometimes pure bhakti is referred to as jnana shunya bhakti. It's not colored by the kind of jnana that we think, it doesn't mean it's not touched by the kind of jnana that enhances bhakti, sambandha jnana, abhideya jnana, and prayojana jnana. Those are very much important. But it's not tinged, it's not contaminated. Let's make it really clear. It's not contaminated by the kind of jnana that moves people to meditate on the Brahman and completely identify with it when they realize it. But more than that, by bhakti, the Lord becomes dependent on the devotee. Bhavita means infused with. Hamara Kosha says Pavita means infused in all three genders. So I tripped over that sentence the first time I read it this morning, but then I realized in Sanskrit you have three genders: masculine, feminine, and neutral or neuter. So in other words, the word has the same form. That infused with has the same form, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neutral, whatever. So you sit on the lotus in the devotees' hearts infused completely with bhakti yoga. Or the phrase can mean in the devotees' hearts manifested by bhakti yoga. Bhavita is the past participle form. Bhakti yoga is the cause of the Lord's manifesting himself. You enter the hearts of the devotees and remain there. You do not leave. This is confirmed by verse 5. Na paishasi nata hridayam guruhat swapum sam. You do not give up the lotus of the devotee's heart. Your path is first being heard about from the mouth of the Guru, and then seen, and then directly served. By this path you are brought to the devotees' lotus hearts. The implication is that the devotees know this path for sadhana bhakti well. The devotees know this path of sadhana bhakti well. The consequent implication is that the person who desires to attain the Lord should understand this path. Even without hearing, the devotees meditate on your various forms using their minds. You reveal those forms to the devotee. This is the meaning according to Sridhar Swami. Or, your devotees doing sadhana concentrate on their spiritual form according to their mood of love, using their minds, and you have them attain their spiritual bodies. You become dependent on your devotee. This is something we find throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, and especially in the books left behind by our acharyas, explaining just how Bhakti Yoga works. So in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we see they've got three broad stages of Bhakti. Actually, he says 2 stages. There's actually 2 stages, sadhana bhakti and sadhya bhakti. But there's a sort of intermediate sadhya that's not full-blown prema. So he describes bhakti, he compares bhakti to a creeper. We see this especially in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, where there's the seed, bhakti lata bij. Bhakti lata means creeper or vine of bhakti. And so there's this seed, which I think Jiva Goswami describes in Bhakti Sandarbha as the determination to practice. And when that seed is watered, because you can keep seeds for a while and nothing's going to happen, they'll stay vital, but they won't sprout. But if you add water, just like when we sprout tulsi, sometimes we advise people, just put it in a little peat pot, just under like the very first pieces of your, whatever the medium is you have in that pot, not very deep, and maybe water it from below. Just let it soak, the water soak up so it doesn't disturb the seeds. Sometimes we tell them, use a paper towel. Sprout your tulsi seeds between the layers of a wet paper towel. So it's because they're very tiny seeds. And then it sprouts. And there are these 2 leaves. Those 2 little leaves, I can't remember the name now. Cotyledon or something like that, I can't remember. Those first 2 little leaves, they're not like the regular leaves of the plant. They've got a top part and a bottom part. So those first 2 leaves are described as sadhana bhakti. And there are 2 kinds of sadhana bhakti. There's Raganuga sadhana bhakti and Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. And so the acharyas describe that top shiny part of the leaves, that's Raganuga bhakti. And maybe I can't remember now. I'm a little confused about this now that I think about it. And then the other side of the leaves is Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. And ultimately they have different results. Now, there's some nuances to, to what we call Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, because devotees need to follow the vidhi in most cases. They need to follow the vidhi and the nisheda, the do's and don'ts of regulative devotional service. But if we do it, maybe not really cognizant of the goal, we may end up with a kind of Vaikuntha sort of prema. But if we do it with the goal of attaining raga nuga bhakti, becoming purified enough so that some raga, some attachment for Krishna, some passion for Krishna, like the residents of Vrindavans, starts to grow in our heart, then we get a different result. Then we get Vraja prema. So then the other leaves, they're the different state, they represent the different stages. So you've got Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti. So those are the stages of sadhana bhakti. So Shraddha means that, at least the initial faith. Sometimes Prabhupada talked about that Adau Shraddha as as the people you encounter coming away from an encounter with the devotees thinking, oh, they're kind of nice people after all. Or sometimes it may just be that they have enough regard just to stop and listen. Just like yesterday, on Saturdays when we go out and Harinam Sankirtan at Kapiolani Park, you'll see Shanti, and then yesterday we had Rebecca and Stephen also, and Dylan. Where's Dylan? Approaching people, and some people, they're just like, you can see that they're looking like just like 5 degrees away from the path they're walking on, just to let you know, like, don't even, right? And then there are other people who think, you look like, oh, maybe they're going to just kind of walk past, and then they hesitate and stop. And they smile, they talk with you a little bit, they might take one of the little booklets and go on their way. And we may see them show up here one day, or at some other temple one day or another, because there was a little exchange there with the devotee. And others stop and hang out, they'll have an actual conversation. And then, as we saw yesterday, and last week, and the week before that, some people will sit down and chant with us. Sometimes they'll stop and chant with us and come back to the temple with us and never leave. I remember back in 1971, probably the spring of 71, this young guy named Gary Davidson decided he was lived in Manhattan Beach or some part of LA, and he decided he was going to go to Hawaii and check out Hawaii. And so he flew to Honolulu International Airport, took a bus down to Waikiki, got off in front of the Moana Hotel, where the kirtan party was. And Siddhasarup engaged him in conversation, and he came back to the temple with us and didn't leave. So this stuff happens. As I mentioned before, his name is now Gaur Govinda. He's a dear, longtime friend. I don't like to say old friend about my older friends, but a longtime friend. And but he spent the first 10 days at the temple sitting on the front steps of the temple reading teachings of Lord Chaitanya, not doing anything else. And hearing, right? Seeing Krishna through the ears from the bona fide spiritual master. And I asked him later, how come was it, you spent a week and a half you spent just reading teachings of Lord Chaitanya? He said, I just wanted to make sure I was getting into something that was real. And apparently it worked, it convinced him. So then that brings us into, now, where does the impulse come? Where does that little bit of faith come from? There's a background. And that background has to do with association of devotees, developing some sukriti, some bhakti sukriti, by having done things unknowingly for devotees. It's all really subtle. So there's a background, but there's not a cause. The cause is bhakti itself or herself. So then that brings the devotee into more systematic association with devotees, and more regular, more systematic association with devotees. And eventually they get to the stage of bhajana kriya, which includes initiation and being engaged systematically in service by the guru. And then anartha nivriti. Anartha nivriti is an interesting stage, because this is a cleansing. Well, bhajana kriya actually has two parts. Well, bhajana kriya has two parts. Anishtita bhajana kriya and nishtita bhajana kriya. Anishtita means unsteady, unsteady practice. So, and there are different things that might sidetrack us. And these all come from our practice, actually. So one is utsaha mayi. Utsaha mayi, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Madhurya Kadambini says it means enthusiasm in the excess. In other words, enthusiasm beyond, it's like getting out over your skis, right? You're really stoked, oh my God, I'm a pure devotee. You know, I've chanted 16 rounds for 3.5 weeks, and I really got into that kirtan after the Sunday feast the other day, and man, those ulujans, whoo! And you're thinking, I'm getting somewhere. You get a little taste, that's nice, but don't get carried away with yourself. Another is Bhavataranga, isn't it? Bhavataranga, running hot and cold. Irina, do you remember? Is that running hot and cold? Bhavataranga, you've been studying Madhurya Kadambini, yeah?
It's been a while.
Okay, me too. Unfortunately. But one of the stages is running hot and cold. Actually, it's Ghanatara. Ghanatara, running thick and thin, is the literal translation, but to translate it into, terms that we understand, running hot and cold. Sometimes you're fired up and sometimes not so much. Sometimes you think, and another is Bhutavikalpa, unsteady determination. So sometimes you're thinking, okay, I've been practicing for a while, maybe I should get ready to take sannyas. After all, I've made all this, I must be really, I should take sannyas. Not be distracted by anything. And sometimes you're thinking, I don't know, maybe I should get married, have a family, get a job, and do this. So you go back and forth between these things. Another is Bhavataranga, riding the waves of whatever success you've had. So a devotee naturally becomes likable, attractive to other people. And people, they say nice things about them, or they do things for them, or something like that, and they get, this is right, everybody should be serving me. And so these things are things that we have to push our way through. As I've mentioned before, I remember when I brought them up once, we were studying Madhurya Kadambini several years ago down in Costa Rica, and one of the devotees in the ashram asked, so Maharaj, how do we avoid these things? I thought, what? No, you don't. You encounter them, you face them, and you push your way through by continuing to practice. So that anishtita, then you come to nishtita sadhana bhakti, where your practice doesn't waver. You just keep moving forward. Then your watchword becomes just like the motto for the Kamehameha schools, imua, forward, progress, like an arrow. You just keep going. And then after nishta, you get to the stage of ruchi. Ruchi means you've developed a taste for your service, and you've developed a taste for your practice. You've developed a taste for serving Krishna. And that pulls you and pulls you and pulls us until we get to the stage of asakti. Asakti, pretty safe. Because then we will have developed a taste for Krishna. And by that time, as our hearts become refined by our practice, we progressively get a better sense of who we are and what kind of relationship Krishna wants to have with us, what kind of service Krishna wants us to do eternally. So Srila Prabhupada, or Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually speaks about, could be according to the devotee's mood, but it also could be according to, it's going to be according to the devotee's mood of service for the Lord. Let's see how he put that in. Yeah, that they learn to concentrate on the spiritual form according to their mood of love, using their minds. So they use their minds, because it's when they're practitioners, when they're still sadhakas, they're using their mind and senses. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. Krishna Anushilanam. It's an activity of the mind and the senses. And then eventually, by the time as they move through asakti, that actually being attached to Krishna, their vision of their relationship with Krishna becomes crystal clear. And when they attain bhava, then Krishna is certainly seated in their hearts, and they're able to just keep worshiping Krishna. Then we worship Krishna with our hearts. Worshipping with our minds and senses is called Cheshta Rupa Bhakti. Worshipping with our hearts is called Bhava Rupa Bhakti. Now in the stage of Bhava, the devotee is probably still going to continue to do some of the external stuff as well. They just may not have the bandwidth for it. Whatever space they have in their minds and senses may be completely taken up by meditating on that form that appears in the heart. So in a sense, you can say that Paramatma becomes replaced by their particular Ishtadeva. He manifests himself, and how does that happen? He comes under the devotee's control. How does that happen? Well, we see, as we look at the three broader stages, sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti, we see that there are certain characteristics that become particularly prominent during those stages. So, in the stage of sadhana bhakti, two things become prominent. Kleshagni, relief from material distress, and shubhada, auspiciousness starts to happen. We become happy. We begin to become happy. And in the stage of bhava, two other things become prominent. The other things don't stop growing. The kleshagni and shubhada, they're still there in the background. But two other things. Moksha lagutakrit, which is minimizing the importance, the significance of impersonal liberation, or any of the kinds of moksha actually. And sudurlabha. It's rarity, it's not just durlabha, it's sudurlabha. It's really hard to attain. Not so many people have attained bhava. And then in the stage of prema, two other things become manifest. Now, in the stage of bhava, instead of leaves growing, we've got blossoms. First, little buds, like in ruchi and asakti, especially in asakti, little buds start to appear. And then in bhava, they become blossoms. In prema, the blossoms become fruit. And they ripen, and they fall from the tree so that others can take advantage of them, right? This is Lord Chaitanya says, I'm a gardener. I'm growing this tree, but I'm just one person. I need help. Lord Chaitanya wants us to help him to cultivate and distribute these fruits of prema, So, we need to apply ourselves to the process so that we can become fit to do so. So in prema, two other characteristics become prominent. One is Sri Krishna, what's the other one? Sri Krishna Karshani. See how bad I am with lists. This is something I know. Irina, do you remember the two characteristics of prema? Anybody from Nectar of Devotion class remember? Two characteristics of prema. This was a few weeks back, so we're all going to be rusty. Sri Krishna Karshani and anyway, Sri Krishna Karshani is the one I want to focus on anyway. That it attracts. This is so attractive that it attracts, so powerful. Prema Bhakti is so powerful that it attracts even the all-attractive Supreme Personality of Godhead and brings him under the control of that devotee's bhakti. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti, this is what I'm going to be talking about on Saturday mornings online for the rest of the month. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and, as it turns out, Jiva Goswami point out that this power to control Krishna begins from the very first day of worshiping the Lord. To some extent, because Jiva Goswami explains in his Bhakti Sandarbha when he talks about there are these verses, different verses from the second chapter of the Bhagavatam. I was going to share those, but I seem to have run over time again. I don't know how that happens. That Jiva Goswami goes through these verses. There are several verses in the second chapter that actually explain, how bhakti progresses. And Jiva Goswami says, if there weren't some degree of control over the Lord, how would he give the sadhaka bhava bhakti? So even sadhana bhakti has some power to control the Lord, even if it's not very strongly manifest, because we do catch the Lord's attention in that stage. And he does reward us according to our surrender. So this verse, when I saw this verse, I thought, oh my gosh, did I hit the jackpot? And then I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? I only have like 25 minutes. Krishna stopped 5 minutes early. They gave me 30, and I only took 40 of those 30 minutes. So this is such a powerful thing. Bhakti Yoga, one more time. I don't remember all the Sanskrit from this verse from the Vedas, but there's a verse in the Vedas, a section of the Vedas called the Matra Shruti, that says, Bhakti alone has the power to draw us near to Krishna. Bhakti alone has the power to show us Krishna. Bhakti alone has the power to bring Krishna under control. Therefore, the most powerful thing of all is bhakti. So this, we see this here in this verse. And how does that happen? By hearing. Well, we don't want to go to the verses because then we'll get started. But we hear, by regularly serving the Bhagavatam. Two kinds of, I'm going to do this with apologies. Two kinds of Bhagavats to serve. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya is the phrase in the verse. And so all the acharyas explain that, and we see this discussed very prominently in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, but we see it also discussed in commentaries of the acharyas on this verse, that Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya means always serving one of two Bhagavats, one or both of two Bhagavats. One is the book Bhagavat, and the other is the devotee Bhagavat. The devotee who's immersed him or herself in hearing and serving themselves, serving the Srimad Bhagavatam. Just like the Rumi poem that I sometimes share about, ask the rose about the rose. He talks about, you can ask the Quran about the meaning of the Quran. If you want to understand the Quran, ask the Quran or that person who has completely given themselves to the service of the Quran in sacrifice. can burn themselves up in service to the Quran. He says, because if you want to know what a rose smells like, you can either smell a rose or essential rose oil, as you like. So serving the devotees, and pleasing the devotees, and regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and associating with devotees who are making some advancement, that's kind of like hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, because whatever they talk about, there's going to be some Bhagavad perspective there. Even if sometimes the talk may be a little casual, gradually they'll bring it around to something from Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is the gist of this verse and this purport. When we regularly hear from the proper source, the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, our hearts progressively become purified to the stage where we will understand in what form Krishna wants us to worship Him. And He will manifest that form in our hearts. Something to look forward to. I'll stop here. Quick questions or comments?
We have a quick one. You mentioned if one is asakti, did you say asakti?
Asakti?
Then one is safe, pretty much safe.
It's a pretty safe.
We see in the case of Bharat Maharaj, even from the stage of Bhava, he
Yep.
belongs.
So there are no stereotypes. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's not mechanical. So we should be cautious. We should always be cautious. Carefully guard that tender little creeper that's growing. First we have to build a fence around it, maybe. Or even screen it in. Prabhupada, when we first started growing Tulsi here back in the spring of 1970, Prabhupada said, we may have to screen the sprouts so that they're not attacked by, I think he said starlings, but the idea was that birds won't come and eat the sprouts. So, but even when it's grown, we need to take care of it as it matures. As the tree matures, as the vine matures, we probably sometimes need to take even better care of it than when we had it fenced in and screened in, because things happen. So yeah, it's not mechanical, it's not stereotyped. There are all kinds of nuances. In my evening Nectar of Devotion class, we've been reading about the different kinds of bhavas that make up rasa. We're beginning to read about the sthai bhavas. We've read about sattvika bhavas, anubhavas, and vyabhichari or sanchari bhavas. And man, it is so nuanced that all we can do is just somehow or other try to just stay with the reading. And we get comments like, oh my gosh, I'm so much in over my head. And my response is, here we are. Let's just hold hands and let our hearts be bathed by this transcendental sound, and hope that there might make little cracks in our hearts so some light can get in there. Is that Leonard Cohen? That's how the light gets in. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So we want some little cracks in our heart. When our hearts be broken open to some extent by our hearing and chanting and our serving. So at least a little bit of light will be able to get in. Does that help?
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, I think there's some prasadam. So this is another form in which Krishna has manifested himself by the demand of the devotees. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Prasad Seva ki